This conference will now be recorded.
It's being recorded, ma'am.
Sorry? Hi everyone, and welcome to Creating New Plants for Pollinators, which will be delivered by Helen's Herbs today. This webinar has been organised by Get Cumbria Buzzing as part of the project, which is running over 3 years to try and increase the number of pollinators across Cumbria, especially in northwest Cumbria and Carlisle. If everyone could leave off their microphones and webcams so it doesn't disturb the presentation. And also, if you've got any questions, put it into the chat bar. On the top right hand corner, you'll see a chat symbol. Click that and put your questions in there. And also, Helen, who will be delivering the talk today, you can see her in full if you click in the middle hand bar a button that says View Everyone. Click that and put it onto Who's Talking instead of Everyone. That means that you'll get Helen enlarged. So I'll just stop sharing my screen and pass you over to Helen. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, thanks Lucy. Hopefully you can hear me. It's very heavy rain and the polytunnel really amplifies the sound. So if you do need me to speak up, then please do let me know. Or maybe Peyton, the daughter who's filming, could come a bit closer at times. So today we're looking at making the most of our plants really. And we're going to be looking at sowing seeds, we're going to be looking at dividing plants, taking cuttings, and making the most of perhaps a small space that you might have and how we can make the best of a small space really. So to start off with, we'll look at small space. So if you're gardening in a very limited space and you've only maybe got planters, for the autumn and winter, sometimes it's difficult to work out how you can make the best of that small space and get the most for any pollinators that are out there. So in my experience, pollinators absolutely love muscari, which are great hyacinths. And what I was going to show you is that even in a small basket like this, or a pot or whatever, what you can do is layer up so that you've got plants that are going to flower in autumn, into winter, and then as spring comes, you're going to have some bulbs coming through. So you're going to get a bit of autumn and winter into spring interest in a small space. So what I've got here then is a basket, and I've just got a plastic liner in it. I'm just going to put a few holes in just so that it does drain easily. And then into the holes, into the planter, I'm going to add some compost. This is just a multi-purpose compost. There's a little bit of grit in there. Okay, now these muscari bulbs, they really need about 10 centimetres depth, that's all. So I'm just going to pop them in now, making sure, of course, root down. Oops. And there's about 40, I think, or 30 in this pack. It was only a pound or two, I don't think it was any more. And you can see the little wispy roots just forming there. So I'm just going to put these all over the basket so that the plants that we put on top, these bulbs will actually come through, and they will come through the plants. So don't worry too much about what you're putting on top. And these are blue and white, and they should be flowering in February. Okay, we're going to just put a little bit more compost on top of there. And then onto the top, we're going to add a lavender. Now this is very late flowering lavender. It's hip cut, but it was transplanted quite late, and so you can see now it's going to be flowering in a few weeks' time, and there'll be 3 or 4 flower heads come on that. That's going to go towards the back of the basket. That smells lovely. We're going to pop a cyclamen in, and you can see the cyclamen is, if you look down there, you can see some little flower heads coming just underneath there. They should be flowering in 3 or 4 weeks as well. Okay, it's well rooted. That's a plant that I had from last year, which I just potted up in a pot, and it's done really well outside all winter. All summer, and it's going to flower all winter. And then we're just going to pop in some bugle. We talked about bugle a couple of weeks ago. Bugle's a fantastic plant for for spring flowering, very early spring flowering, and it makes a lovely contrast with the lavender. And then back there, I'm just going to add some ivy. Don't need the whole root. Put some of that root in. You can see there. That's just going to go at the back, and that'll actually quite tall, and it'll actually drape over the sides and the back there. Just put a little bit more compost down just to tidy that up. Oops. So what you'll find is this bugle will grow quite, carry on growing through the autumn quite well, and it'll just sort of drape over the front. And then the lavender will stay sort of that colour all year. You can trim it off once flowering is finished. The cyclamen, as I say, should still be flowering come January. And the ivy, well, that will grow and sort of cover the sides and the edges and make a nice kind of frame to it all. And then your bulbs will just pop up and come through, and that will be really pretty. So I'm going to put that down there, and that'll be a nice little space for the pollinators to get a pit stop really through the winter. Now what I wanted to do next is to show you some seed that you can start sowing now, and you've still got time to do this before winter. And many of you might already know about Phacelia. Now Phacelia is a green manure. It's a really useful plant for bees in particular. It's in the borage family. And as long as you've got warm soil, which we have now, we've had a quite a warm summer, the soil is warm, you can sprinkle the Phacelia seed now, and you'll get it growing pretty up to 2 months. You've got September and October, and it should have time to flower, especially if you're in a sort of quite sheltered place. You can leave this on a bed that you're not using over winter, sort of a vegetable bed, or an area that you've sort of recently dug over and you're not sure what to do with it. Put the Phacelia down, and you'll be able to dig it in the spring, and it will improve your soil. And when it flowers, of course, it is absolutely brilliant for bees and other pollinators. So really have a look at Phacelia. If we focus in on the spelling there, you can have a look at that. And this is widely available really on the internet. You can pick this up probably at garden centres as well. For every metre square of ground that you want to cover, you only need a gram of Phacelia seed. So it isn't a lot. It probably costs a couple of pounds, something like that. And what you need to do is just sow it onto a seed tray. I'll just get some seed trays here. So you just spread it evenly. It's a very small seed. Okay, and then you will cover cover that with a little bit of vermiculite. Sorry about the noise of the rain, it's very, very loud today. And then put that somewhere. I can put it on a hotbed because I have a propagator which has electric cable running under it with sand and a lid, and that will actually be up in 2 or 3 days. You might remember that last week I planted, well, just roughly, planted some calendula seeds. We were talking about edibles last week, weren't we? And these were the calendula seeds that I planted last week. And here in this little seed tree, you can see we've got calendula already up. And that was just within a week. And they will continue to grow and hopefully be flowering before the first frosts. So that hasn't taken long at all for those annuals to start growing. Now the other seed I want to show you, I want to get in on the action, are borage seeds. And of course, if you have borage growing in your patch or in your garden, you'll be able to have a look inside the flower heads now, and you'll see that the seeds are already starting to form. Once they're black, they're mature and ready to plant. Can't find any black ones. As soon as they're black, they tend to fall out, actually. So you need to gather them quite quickly. That one's almost mature there. But that's where they are. And there's usually 4 little seeds in there. So that can be sown now, and again, like the Phacelia, that will produce flower hopefully by the end of October. Now, I've also put a couple of seed heads from some herbs. This one here is a fennel. That's a fennel head, and you can see how many seeds there are there. There's really no need to buy a pack of fennel seeds. These can be planted in the state they're in now, in the green state, and they will germinate at about 18 degrees on a propagator. If you haven't got a propagator, a warm windowsill with plastic bag over will be just as good. And you'll get little seedlings which you can overwinter in a cold frame. There's no need to keep those in the house or anything over winter. The cold frame is absolutely fine. And you'll have lots and lots of lovely fennel plants for next year. That's fennel. And this one is a French parsley. And you can see again, wonderful seeds here, ready now to plant. Now, fennel takes a little bit more heat and moisture in order to germinate. So what you really need to do is to make sure that the soil that you're putting the parsley seed into is very damp and warm, and that the seed itself is, sorry, I'm being disrupted here by my camera person who's sneezing. The seed itself needs to be mature and ready. Now, people have told me in the past that the best way to make sure that your parsley actually germinates is by putting boiling water on the seed before you actually plant it. But I'm not going to do that, and I've never done that. What I tend to do is just use a pot of moist compost, must be moist, and then just using my own seed, give it a bit of a rub between your fingers just to kind of help it to start to sort of break up a little bit. So the shell, the outer shell is a little bit sort of abrased really. Okay, so you've got a bit of seed like that. And then on top of that, we can add some of the vermiculite. And then that's going to go onto the propagator at about 19 degrees centigrade. And that's got to be kept moist and warm for about 2 weeks. And between 2 and 3 weeks on a propagator isn't out of the ordinary for parsley seed. If you're sowing it outside in the spring, you might find it takes longer than that. So that's French parsley, and that's what it looks like. And you can see from one plant, that's one seed head. There's lots and lots of seed to go at. So you can sprinkle that on open ground in the spring, or as I've just done, into pots so that you can transplant those pots in the springtime. And when these parsley flower, which they do because they're biennial, when they flower, they are very attractive to pollinating insects. Okay, so I just want to go on now from the seeds and talk a little bit about cuttings. And what we've got here is pelargonium, scented pelargonium, and this is Attar of Roses, which is a really scented pelargonium and very easy to take cuttings from. So using a pair of secateurs, or ideally a knife, and it's recommended that you use a knife because by using secateurs when you're taking cuttings, what you're doing is actually squeezing the stem between the secateurs. Whereas if you use a knife, it's a cleaner cut and it's got more surface area really to root from. So we're going to use the knife, and what we're going to do is just make a cut just here so that the cutting itself is about 8 centimeters, maybe something like that. Okay, and then we're going to pop that into, again, some moist multi-purpose compost. The thing with pelargoniums is they really don't like it to be too wet. So once you've planted it, and I'm just going to press it in, no hormone rooting powder, just going to press it in. Once it's in there, I won't re-water that. I'm going to put it again somewhere dry. It doesn't really need to be in the propagator. It will probably root absolutely fine, you know, around sort of 10 to 12 degrees, something like that. But it will take a few weeks before you see the rooted cuttings developing. You could start it off in a little jam jar of water and watch the roots develop and then pot it on. But they're absolutely so easy to root, and it's really worth having a go. This is one that I did, yeah, that sounds like Blue Peter, doesn't it? But this is one that I did maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you can see it's well rooted through. I'll just tip it up so you can see the roots. Nicely developed right through the pot. And it's even flowering. Now really, I would take that flower off because you really want to put the strength and the power of the plant into producing leaf at this stage in the year. It seems such a shame. And pollinators do absolutely love this fragrant pelargonium. So it's a nice one to have in your house or in your allotment or in your garden through the summer, spring and autumn. It isn't frost hardy, so you do have to be careful that you don't leave them out through the coldest winter. But very easy to take cuttings and keep them going right through if you'd like to do that. Last week I think I talked to you a little bit about bergamot. Now bergamot, just picked this flower from the garden, Bergamot is herbaceous perennial, which will grow really well in a nice sunny spot. That's the flower there, and quite easy to take cuttings from. So if you have, and I've just actually got some rooted cuttings here. So these are plants that I've actually pulled up from the mother plant. I've just pulled them up, and you can see they've got the root attached. So this is a rooted cutting. What I'm going to do, that is going to be so easy to repot. It's already got the roots almost, established now. So what I'll need to do is just get a pot that's got some crocks in the bottom to help with the drainage, and then just add some compost, a little bit of sand and grit, a bit more compost. They don't have to be in terracotta pots. This was just the first one I came to when I went outside. And then what you're going to do is just put that bergamot in there, get that well watered, and that won't be a problem today. We've got plenty of water outside. And that really won't need to go into a propagator or anything. That will just stay outside, somewhere sheltered, out of the wind. And within a week or two, that it will be a new plant, and it will get established before winter. So it's a good time really to take those sort of rooted cuttings. Lots more in here, which I've just, as I say, just pulled up, and you can see I've had them standing in water for a day or two, and you can see lots of little roots on them, very easy to separate, and it will give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 new plants from the one that was in the garden. Okay, so that's a job that you could do now, and it will really maximise the number of plants that you can get from one herbaceous plant. Now, not every plant can be, you can't use rooted cuttings from every plant, of course. Things like rosemary, you've got one stem, and so you need to take cuttings from rosemary. And I've got a rosemary plant here. This one's a little bit yellow, and that's probably because it's running out of nutrients, maybe, or it might be that it's had a little bit too much water. We've had a lot of water, and it's been maybe outside and got too wet. But it'll be fine. I'll give it some seaweed fertilizer, and that will probably pick it up. You can use seaweed fertilizer now, right the way from March to the end of October, during the growing season, really. After October, stop using something like seaweed fertilizer. But during the growing season, I would say that is the best thing for things like herbs. It's an organic, natural product that is going to enhance the flavour and also the nutritional value of any herbs or vegetables. So it's an important thing to add to your list, really, for gardening. Couldn't really do without it. Now, I just want to show you some cuttings that I did a few weeks ago. And these are rosemary cuttings here. When I'm making herb cuttings, I find that this kind of tray is really, really useful. It doesn't take up much room in the propagator, so that's really good. And it seems to just be enough space for the herbs to make good roots. And once they've filled that root space, they're ready then to pot on. Now, I sell my herbs in small 9 centimetre pots, so I then pot them from this stage into the 9cm pot. And I'll just show you how I'll get them out. So we just, from the bottom, just squeeze very gently, and you'll see that that one's fairly well rooted there. And that's now ready to pot on into a new pot very gently, and that will find its way right down. I mean, within a month or so, the roots will be right through and the plant will be a nice big size again. If you want to encourage side shoots from rosemary, once it's established, just nip out the top, and that will encourage side shoots to form. Okay, you can see these are some that we did 2 or 3 weeks ago, and these have been nipped out in the middle, and they're forming more bushy kind of habit. This one's a good example here. That's a nice bushy habit which will create a nice shape. So when you're taking a rosemary cutting, what you want is a stem which isn't forming a flower. So if this was in flower, you wouldn't use the stem with the flower on it. Okay, so what you do is take a nice straight stem, just cut maybe about 6 to 8 centimeters long. Okay, take those bottom leaves off, and then that then can be stuck into, I'll just give you an example here. This won't go straight in again, but that one can go straight in like that, into moist compost, then onto the propagator, and 2 weeks or so and it should be rooted. Now, July, August into September are ideal times really to take cuttings from rosemary. After that, it tends to get a little bit more difficult, and you might need to use a heeled cutting. So just try and sort of get a few jobs done this next week really, in terms of rosemary and also thyme, and the ones that are a little bit more tricky perhaps. So over here we've got, this is oregano, and again these are cuttings taken from this oregano. Now if you've got an oregano in your garden, it might well have flowered like this one has, and if it's already flowered, it's a good idea to just get some snippers and just snip off those old flowers and old leaves. And you can see I'm just tidying it up, getting rid of any leaves that are in there. And this is really making the most of your oregano. First week in September, this is a really good job to do, because all of those flowers now have died off, and those old leaves tend to be a bit woody and a bit tasteless. And so the best thing to do now is to get rid of them, give it a real good haircut, and you'll see being quite severe with the clippers there, taking any moss out that's underneath there. We don't want any moss, so that's suffocating it a little bit. And you can see by doing that, you're encouraging the small leaves from the bottom to regrow, and those will now regrow during September and October and into November until the first frost really, and then you'll get fresh oregano to eat again, and you may even get a little bit more flowering, but it will tidy the plant up and make it much tidier really for the spring, and the new flowers will be a nice size again, and you'll get plenty of them for the pollinators. Okay, so if you've got an oregano like that in your garden, you cut it back you'll see, like this one, it's really well rooted, and it could quite easily be split. Now, usually the oregano splits by sort of layering. You can see here some of these branches are actually layered, and if I was to just put my fingers through it, some of the plant will divide. Sounds awful. Sounds like I'm tearing it apart, but this is a fine time to do it. And what you'll get is 2 plants instead of 1. So there you've got your new oregano plant, and you can see lots of root there. It could be divided up more actually. Can you see? We could even make 3 out of that. 1, 2, and then you've got this one here. Now this is the Oregano Country Cream. Not all of the oreganos are as easy to split. The common oregano tends to have a sort of one stem and not kind of as many sort of layered roots coming off it. So just watch that. It might not be as easy to split. But I've got 3 there, which I would then pot on. And oregano likes nice free draining compost. It likes to be in a sunny place. So I just push that root in, just like that. Make sure that it's well draining, and that in a few weeks' time will fill the pot and be a new plant. And again with this one we can do the same, and the mother plant we can do the same. So we've got 3 for the price of 1. Alternatively, of course, you could take some of these cuttings that you've just taken from your oregano, take the flowering head off, and using a knife, or these are very sharp, what you could do is make some cuttings. And this is what we've done here. So these are also oregano cuttings that we took 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you'll see hopefully that they're fairly well rooted. The roots just coming through there, and they're ready to pot on into new pots. So this is Oregano Country Cream. I'm just pushing the root ball up just so that you can see. Oh, we've got two in there. We've got a catmint in that one as well. I won't pull that one out because it's a little bit wet and I don't want to dislodge it. Okay, so those are Oregano Country Cream, and we can divide them because they layer, and we can also take cuttings and they will root quite easily. Again, if you've got a hot box, a propagator, it is easier to get them to root, but it's not impossible without. So have a go and see how you get on. Okay, so we've looked at a little bit of herbs there. Just want to show you this one, which is thyme. Now, at this time of year, a creeping thyme, you might have creeping thymes in your rockeries or in your herb gardens at the front, and they really do like to creep. Now, you'll find that if that's in the ground, it will create roots from the bottom here. So roots will take hold and new plants will grow naturally, and that's by layering again. So I'm going to encourage this one to do that on its own by putting it into a really big pot. So I might even put it in a pot as big as this. This is a huge pot, I know, and you never want to have anything as big as this at home. But just to give you an example, if I was to pop this creeping thyme in here and just let it do that, by next spring all of these branches here, all of these stems would have completely covered the whole of this pot, and they would have each put down roots, layered roots. And what I would then do is just go around with a knife or a pair of secateurs and just clip, 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 and each one of those would be new plants. So this creeping red thyme would have let down lots and lots and lots of roots to make lots of new plants, and then they could be potted up into single pots. So it's a very adventurous little thyme, this one. If you've got flower heads still on your thyme at the moment, remember this is a good time again to give it a trim, to trim off any flower heads that are sticking out, because you don't want it to put power, put its energy into making flower and seed at this point. What you want to do is make it sort of put its energy into green growth and leaf development once you've potted it on like that. But that will make a huge creeping red thyme, which I will then divvy up and put that into lots of little pots. So that's an idea. And if you've got a patch of ground where it's well drained and sunny, it's a good thing to do, because you can make more of your own creeping thymes. And then those creeping thymes can be put along a pathway perhaps, or the front of a rockery, or can soften the edges of planters, and they're a really fantastic source of nectar for bees in particular in May into June. Bright pink flower, as you'll remember, we talked about, I think, last time and the time before. So you can see there, it's a bright pink flower, thyme cochineus, or creeping red. And I'll just pop that in there. I'm talking about layering. I just want to show you that this winter savory has done that itself. So I've just come to actually choose a winter savory out of the polytunnel. You can see here's the mother plant here. Obviously one of the branches has leant down and it's layered itself. Can you see? And new roots have actually formed. And can you see there? We've got possibly 3 plants there, and that's been caused by layering. So we've got one little winter savory there, which can be potted up. We've got another one there with roots, which can be potted up, and a third one, which is a little bit less viable, but I'm sure it'll be okay. If I pop that somewhere warm, I'm sure that'll grow really well. Winter savory, of course, is evergreen. It's already flowered this year, and the insects have foraged on it for 2, 3, 4 weeks now. But that's going to still be useful right through the winter in the kitchen, and it will continue to grow slowly over winter. And next year it'll be a really good sized plant, that one. So these are all to pot up, and we've got 4 plants for the price of 1. I will put those into separate pots, of course. I wouldn't put them all together in the one. Just having a walk around the garden today in the rain, I noticed that this Alpine Strawberry had obviously decided it wanted babies, and it's put out runners, and the runners have obviously rooted themselves onto the soil, and you can see here they're ready to take off, and they're well rooted and they're ready to make independent plants and go out and live on their own. I just need a little bit of compost for that. I think I've run out of compost now, so that would just be potted into a proper pot. That's not the right pot for it, and that will be ready to plant and grow on. And from one little plant, you can see here we've got another one there, another one there, another one there. I think there's two there actually. So these are little native strawberries, little Alpine strawberries, which will really naturalise in a sunny border and create fantastic white and yellow flowers, which bees absolutely love. And they do produce little red strawberries, which are edible to us and which can be put into fruit salads and things and into drinks, and they're really pretty. So lots and lots of plants there, lots of babies to pot on from the mother plant, and that's just really done that itself. You can see it's found soil and it's rooted, and we can make use of those. Okay, so that's the native Alpine strawberry. What else? Well, people often ask me about mints, and this is this one here is a Basil Mint, and this one is an Apple Mint. Now the Apple Mint is just about to flower, and the Basil Mint is already flowering. Yeah. So if you were to if you have a mint like this in your possession, what I would suggest is it needs work. So what you could do is you could split it, okay? And you can see how I'm really forcing it apart. And from this one plant, it's probably possible to get about a dozen. Okay. So you've got rooted cuttings there, and what I'm going to do, in order for the mint plant to really put all its energy into producing root, I'm going to just snip off some of the foliage, certainly the brown foliage that's not looking so healthy. I'm just going to take off that flowering head, and then that will be potted up into a plant pot, and you'd have quite quickly a new plant there, and as I say, probably up to a dozen new plants, because just by dividing you're going to get new growth straight away, and that will, it's a really good time to do that, because that will produce lots and lots of leaf from now till December probably. But the other way to produce more apple mint from the plant is to take cuttings, and you want a cutting that's probably about 8 to 10 centimeters long. Take off those bottom leaves, and in order to reduce transpiration, just take off some of those leaves as well. And then what you could do is put that into a jam jar of water on the windowsill, and within a week or two new roots will grow. Now that tends to be more successful in the springtime, spring and summer, when the plants are really growing quickly. At the moment the plants aren't growing so quickly, the light levels are lower, so really it's a better idea, if you do want to get more out of your mint plants, to split them and to use root cuttings. And I would suggest really, if you have got an old mint like this, it will do it a lot of good to take it, split it, and maybe give a plant to each of your friends, and then they'll be happy and you'll be happy and your mint will be happy. Okay, so from this one mint plant, this one apple mint, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think that was 6 rooted cuttings, rooted plants, and then we've also got bits of root like this. Can you see? This is a bit of the apple mint. Now, if you were to plant that, that would also grow. So within perhaps a month, you'd have new shoots coming through, and you'd have yourself a mint plant from just something as little as that. So they are very productive, our mint plants. And apple mint in particular is a favourite with lots and lots of bees. The basil mint is wonderful. It's a gorgeous flower and it's very aromatic, and it's a really nice one to have if you like cooking, because it's a good one in the kitchen. So they're both worth dividing and making the most of, really, rather than buying new. It's really not worth buying new mints. Well, I've made a right mess there. So what I'm going to do now is just show you quickly this terrible, terrible chive plant. Now, if you have chives in your garden, hopefully they won't be as bad as this. But this chive plant is really, really root bound, and it's feeling very sorry for itself. Now, what I would suggest if you have chives like this is, again, splitting. Now, I might need to use a knife to split this because it is so bad. You can hear how dense that is. But can you see that each of the chives has a little root all of its own, which has grown from seed? And what I would do is take that and then just cut off the chive and repot each one. Just repot that into some multi-purpose compost, and you really only want 6 to 10 chives in each pot, in each area that you're growing. Okay, you don't want a lot. You don't need to be very big clumps, because they do develop, and after 2 years there'll be huge clumps again. So from this one chive plant, I'm getting, that's 3. That probably will grow as well. It's got a little bit of root on it. So it's just a case of getting your hands dirty, really. Some of them may take a bit of encouragement. A couple of them might take a bit of encouragement to grow, but they still have roots on them, so you might be lucky. And we've probably got 6, 8 different clumps of chives here from one plant. Let's take all that moss from between, because that's not going to help, and then trim that again to encourage root growth rather than stem growth. Okay, so we've got lots and lots of chive plants there. You may have seen that I had a seed head there. There's the seed head, and you can see the seeds, the chive seeds, the black chive seeds in there. Now, they also are very easy to grow. So if you do have flowers on your chives, just pot a little, maybe half a dozen seeds into one pot this size, and within maybe 2 or 3 weeks you will have the chives emerging. This chive plant was grown from seed about 6 weeks ago. So I put these seeds in the propagator about 6 weeks ago, and you can see that they're really doing well. and they should be flowering by next summer. Okay, so those have grown from seed, and these will grow on from root cuttings. So I hope that's been helpful. I've been very messy, but if there's any questions at the end, I'll try and answer them, or you could email me with any questions as well. I hope you have a go at maybe sowing some seeds, doing some cuttings and dividing some plants, because it all helps, doesn't it? It saves money, and if you can put together a drift of plants, it helps the pollinators because they like the plants to be in drift. So instead of having one clump, you'll hopefully have 5 or 6 clumps in the same area, and that's going to be a good thing for the pollinators next year. So I'll come back to Lucy.
Hello, thank you, Helen. That was really interesting. Thank you so much. Just in the chat part, I've posted a link to a survey, to an evaluation form. If people could fill that in, that would be really fantastic. It helps us do more of these workshops. But in terms of questions, it looks like we've got a couple. But if you've got any more, please put it in the chat bar. Helen, what was the name of the bulbs that went in first?
The bulbs.
The bulbs. The bulbs are Muscari, and that one was Magic Carpet. But Muscari bulbs are really fantastic for bees in particular, and they flower, well, they flower sort of February, March, sometimes into April, and they're blue, shades of blue. But you can pick them up in all kinds of garden centres and hardware shops and things. Muscari, grape hyacinth or Muscari.
Thank you. And Janine has asked, I planted some lavender seeds in late spring, which have now grown into nice young plants who are in the ground. They only have 1 stalk each. What is the best way to get them to bush out?
Have they flowered?
Doesn't say. No,
Right.
they
Well, the thing is, haven't
no.
yeah, they have or they haven't? They haven't
They
flowered.
haven't. No.
No. The best thing to do really is to trim. Now, it might seem a little bit, oh, you know, you don't want to trim them when they've put so much effort into growing, but by trimming the top off, you're going to encourage side shoots. And if you let them grow too tall, they're only going to produce 1 spike of flower. So by cutting them now, they're probably not going to flower this year, but next year they'll be a much thicker and plumpier, lavender plant, and they'll produce lots of spikes of flower. And they'll probably flower quite early on next year. They'll probably be flowering in June, I should think.
Have we got any more questions? Anyone got any more? Doesn't seem like we've got any more questions. Oh, I forgot to mention, on our webpage, Get Cumbria Buzzing, you can add your postcode to a map to show that you're planting for pollinators. So you just go on to Get Cumbria Buzzing, and then there'll be a link to a map, because we want to get as many gardens buzzing for pollinators as possible. So if you could fill that in as well, that would be great. But it doesn't seem like we've got any more questions.
Well, if people have questions that they haven't raised yet, I'm quite happy to answer them by email.
Could you say your email, Helen?
My email is helen@helensherbs.co.uk.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Thanks very much.